Hello, and welcome to Hedgehog Storytime, where I read my weird original fiction. The following is part of the Mame Cerebrum project, linked to the playlist in the description below. Yes, you have to read them all. No, that is not a request. So quite obviously, the Katya stories are a bit inspired by my good old H.P. Lovecraft. I mean, say what you will about the man. I adore his work, and I wanted to kind of do a little bit of my own version. Obviously, it'll feel very different. I actually originally based this story off of a script I wrote for an adaptation of The Call of Cthulhu. It was pretty bad, I'm not gonna lie. I was still at the phase of my writing career where I was convinced that my quote-unquote style needed to include Whedon-esque quips or it wasn't my style. The tone of this story supports them a little better, but I also have a lot less of them than I did in that original script. So, yeah, I think I fixed it up and redeemed myself a bit. So, without further ado, here is Katya Borozova and the Dreamer Eternal, Part 2. The eerie calling of the whippoorwills sets his skin on edge as he drags the sacrifice through the forest. She's crying, her face a mess of tears and snot. She's fighting him as well, dragging her feet and squirming as best she can with every step. "Let me see my father!" she keeps screaming. "There's been some terrible mistake!" He's been told not to listen to anything she says. His guilt will only ruin the coming glory. The clearing is just up ahead of them anyway. There's a hush of expectation, anxiety, maybe a little bit of fear in the crowd. They are not wearing robes or hoods or any sort of suspected garment. Large hats and downturned gazes are enough to keep these ordinary people's identities a secret. The only person wearing a robe is the man perched upon the hill at the edge of the clearing. He raises his hands in supplication as the girl is placed in front of him. She calls for her father again, but one glance under the hood of the priest is enough to silence her. Nothing to be done now. She still struggles, but he holds her down upon the altar as the priest slices her from neck to abdomen. Blood and viscera spraying into his and his partner's faces. She screams, but not for long. Or if she does, he doesn't hear it. For deep under the earth, something is laughing, giggling, and whispering directly into his ear, filling his head with utter nonsense that threatens to tear his skull asunder. He is down here too, deep below the world, choking on dirt with every labored inhalation. But he is not alone. It is not just the voice, even now piercing his mind with static. It is so vast under the earth, so dead and cold. And so he fights, grasping at handfuls of sand and mud to try to claw his way out. He is forced to stop when a series of cold, rubbery fingers wrap around his neck. The dirt enters his mouth as he opens it wide, instinctually trying to gasp for breath. He is choking.
"You cannot stop this,"
the voice whispers. Simon shot up, coughing furiously. For a solid minute, he struggled to make sense of anything around him. His heart pounded in his ears, and his mouth was so dry it felt like he was still choking on sand. But finally, he rallied enough to force his vision back into focus, at least as much as he could without his glasses. Soft sunlight streamed into his bedroom. It looked to be about mid-morning. How did he get back here? The last thing he remembered, it was late into the evening and he had gone down to the speakeasy with... A loud clatter made him nearly jump out of his skin. Turning towards the noise, he found a large stack of books strewn across the floor, and a very surprised Katya Borozova standing in the doorway, having just dropped the aforementioned books a moment before. "You're awake," she stated bluntly, and the wideness of her eyes concerned him. "How long have I been out?" He blinked rapidly with embarrassment. 3 days? 3... Simon tried to stand up, but was caught by a sudden wave of vertigo and plopped back down again. Katya abandoned her books and approached the bed. "You've been delirious with a fever this whole time, ever since you collapsed at the Smiling Goat. And you've been here?" He would admit he was a little mortified, so much so that he ironically did nothing to prevent her from feeling his sweaty forehead. She simultaneously looked a little frustrated and amused at his question. Well, there's no one else, is there? It also came out a little more pointed than she maybe intended. Simon looked down at his clenched fists. No, he said. Not really. Thank you. Katya looked like she wanted to say something, but instead she reached down to pick up her books. Let me, he made to stand. Don't you dare, she snapped. You haven't eaten in 3 days, and if you collapse on me again, so help me God. He remained sitting, feeling like a bit of an ass. You're right. I'm sorry. Her face softened a bit. I'll make you something to eat. Then we'll talk. A few minutes later, she delivered unto him a few pieces of toast with jam. They were a little burnt. He had the distinct feeling that cooking was not one of her strong points, but he ate them without complaint. It made him feel a little less lightheaded, at least. Katya mostly sat in silence in a nearby chair while he ate, but as soon as he was finished, she blurted out, Do you have any idea what just happened to you? He shook his head slowly, still chewing on his last bite of toast. Nothing like this has ever happened to me before. Did you have any dreams? She asked that just as he was swallowing, and he coughed a little as he nearly choked. Why would you ask that? He muttered finally. You were saying things in your sleep, she admitted. I wrote them down. Grabbing a notebook from a nearby table, Katya found a specific page and passed it to him. Simon stared down at the paper in his lap, blinking profusely. Is my brain broken? He asked after a solid minute. If you're seeing nonsense, then no, your head is screwed on just right. Katya smiled. But doesn't it look like rather familiar nonsense? He looked at it closer. Come to think of it, it's the same. Katya's eyes glowed, but she didn't specify. She just handed him a second notebook. Scrawled upon these pages were the exact same words in the exact same order, but above that were the letters in Enochian, and the hieroglyphics, and several other alphabets they'd found in his canvases. I have no explanation for this, he admitted. Nor do I. She grinned broadly as she said it, but I have a few ideas. I've been stuck here for the past 3 days, after all. Like what? No, wait. Katya's face scrunched up as she berated herself. You just woke up 20 minutes ago. We should make sure you're really okay first. Can you stand? Simon nodded, a little disappointed that she was holding back. But he wasn't lying, since eating his toast, his lightheadedness had mostly receded. Katya insisted on helping him, which was for the best, as he was still a bit shaky. Maybe you should take a bath first, too, Katya commented. You do not smell so good. He was about to reply with something no doubt scathing, but then he caught a whiff of himself and had to agree with her. Katya looked a little worried about the prospect, but he insisted that he was fine. All right, I will let you alone, but I will be very upset if you hurt yourself. It was totally fine. Despite a small amount of shakiness, Simon didn't feel any worse than a morning after a little too much to drink. The steam from the bath helped with the remnants of his headache, and he actually felt quite refreshed now as he met Katya back out in the main room. You look fine, she commented. Should I not be? I would think you would at least be sore from all the thrashing. All right, you're really gonna have to fill me in on everything. He almost found himself a little exasperated. You've been in the throes of some bizarre fever for the last 3 days. You were muttering gibberish to yourself and thrashing around so bad you nearly hit the floor several times. That's why you've been so concerned. I'm finding it odd how suddenly you are fine. Katya looked just a little disturbed. You are sure this has never happened to you before? As far as I'm aware. For some reason, he felt embarrassed about not having a more exciting answer for her. But I doubt the two of us will make much progress on that front. What have you been doing all this time? Well, Katya began, the first thing I did was telegram the professor, since he was researching strange dreams and such. His response was, and I quote, keep an eye on him, stop, could be valuable subject, stop. Happy to have his concern. Simon frowned. Katya shrugged, grinning sheepishly. He may have a point. Most of what I've been doing is going through his box of dream research. And he found something? Many somethings, she admitted. You are not the only one having strange dreams. I was helping a little here and there, but I had no idea his research had been so extensive. There are dozens of accounts in that box of odd dreams, all from the past 2 months. Simon plopped down onto the sofa, confused. But why document it? Everyone has strange dreams all the time. Not like these, she explained. Most of these dreams are variants of the exact same things. Katya reached into the cardboard box, pulling out a neat document. Athalia Brown, 37, housewife, repeated dreams of being buried alive while a voice speaks to her in gibberish. Joseph Thayer, 26, solicitor, has dreamt 5 times in the last month of being somewhere dark and cold, voice whispering in his ear, can't make out the words. Mary, let me guess. Dreams of being underground, spoken to by a faceless voice. Well, yes, but actually there's more to this one. Even Katya looked a little surprised. Someplace dark and cold, whispering voice, but this time there is a hooded figure who cuts her open before she's buried underground. A hooded figure? The hairs on the back of his neck raised, though he didn't quite know why. Simon thought about it for a second. Almost had it. Nope. It was gone. By this point, Katya was digging through the box again. Actually, this one's a little different, too. Dark place, whispering voice, but then there's mention of being in a crowd full of people who wouldn't look at each other. There it was again. That strange itching feeling. This one here mentions being in the middle of the woods. Katya. Simon interrupted her suddenly. I think I remember something. About what? About the dream I was stuck in for the past 3 days. The darkness and the voice were the same as they always are, but there was something before that. Once the words started coming, they didn't stop. Simon remembered it as he went. The clearing in the woods, the girl screaming for her father, the blood-hungry crowd and the carnage they watched with rapturous gazes. The two started frantically digging through the box, and as they did, they found more and more notes of scattered fragments that meant nothing on their own, but when put together seemed to construct Simon's complete dream. This is almost scary, Katya admitted. I think it might be real. Simon didn't really know why he felt that way. Like a prophetic dream? Katya seemed a little skeptical. Maybe, I don't know. Simon struggled to put it into words. It almost feels like a warning. I think it's happening here, and it's happening soon. Well, there's one good way to make you sound not insane, Katya sighed. It is also my least favorite thing in the entire world. She held up one of the documents. On the top was the name, age, and occupation of the dreamer, and also a phone number to contact them. Telephone calls. Of course, not all of them had phone numbers, not all of them had phones, but of those that did, they picked a few at random and attempted to call. They quite annoyed the operator in doing this. When the first one rang for too long, Katya was relieved, but then the next one did as well. And the next. They must have called 10 people and not a single one of them answered. They're all there, Simon muttered. It's happening now. He realized that he probably did sound insane, but it was a feeling deep down somewhere past his gut. Something visceral. He knew this was true. He could almost see it happening behind his eyelids. All right. Katya tried to stay rational. Say you are not wrong and there is a cult sacrificing a young woman right now. Where are they? How are we to know? Simon didn't have an answer for her and glanced over towards the window on the far side of the room. But then he froze. Blinked a few times. Katya, he said softly, I think I might actually have an answer to that. His canvas, the one that had started this whole thing, was resting on the sofa. Simon picked it up and held it up to the light. What are you doing? Katya asked as he repeatedly raised and lowered the painting. Well, I just remembered, he said. You commented that the magic circle on this one is odd. I think it's because it's not a magic circle at all. Frowning, Katya pressed her face close to his to see what he was looking at. Her mouth dropped open. It's the view from the window. Just as he said, the jagged upper lines of the circle perfectly matched the outlines of the buildings, and beyond that, the tops of the trees that started near the edge of town. I left it for myself. It's happening that way. Katya's frown grew deeper. And you're really sure about this? He nodded. What do you think we should do? Call the police, probably. It was the most normal thing she'd said since they met. What can you or I do against a whole crowd of people? Do you think they'll believe us? Katya froze. Then she seemed to think of something. Yes, I do believe they will. She ran not over to the telephone, but once again over to the cardboard box. This whole thing started with a suicide, she explained. The victim left writing that looked like, of course, hieroglyphics at the scene, so the officer in charge of the case contacted the professor. I'm sure his name is in here somewhere. She dug around for a minute before finding a single piece of paper. Ah, here it is. Detective LeGrasse? Simon glanced down at the paper, which turned out to be a letter. Looks French, he commented. Probably LeGrasse. I never learned French. Katya clicked her tongue. They tried, but it never stuck. Before he could ask about the specificity of that comment, she picked up the phone and dialed the police station. Simon put his head next to the receiver so he could hear as well. Hello? Katya said in response as someone picked up the line. I'm looking to speak to, Detective LeGrasse? Speaking, came a deep, husky voice. My name is Katya Borozova. I'm the assistant to Professor Gerhardt Engel. Borozova? Oh, yes, I'm sure the dog mentioned you. How can I help? After taking a deep breath, Katya explained everything they'd found as quickly as she could, and when she was done, there was silence for just a moment. Then came a deep sigh. So it's happening again, huh? Again? Katya and Simon glanced at each other in confusion. South of town, you say? It'll take us a while to mobilize, but we'll be down as soon as we can. And before she could get another word in, he hung up the phone. Luckily for him, Katya looked just as confused as Simon felt, but that expression was quickly departing in favor of a new one. A clenched sort of determination. Katya, he began, what are you thinking? That the police are not going to get there fast enough, she admitted. I mean, it could all be happening right now at this very moment for all we know. It could, but like you said, what would you even be able to do to stop them? I don't know. But would you try to stop me? Simon sighed. He'd only just become acquainted with her, but he was already well aware that Katya was more a force of nature than a person. I'd say that I'm going with you. Really? You're so short you'd get trampled by the crowd. Katya frowned. That wasn't very funny, Simon. Lowellham had been carved out of the thick northern forests, grown up on the logging industry, so it made sense that it was still surrounded by such. Less than a mile out of town, the roads and fields gave way to trees, and this was where Katya and Simon found themselves struggling southward. Unconventional though it was, Simon supposed they were lucky Katya was wearing pants. He found himself falling a little behind her. I wish your dream had been more specific, she complained as she scampered over divots and fallen trunks. It could have at least told us how far we would be going. I don't know if that's how this kind of thing works. Simon wasn't quite panting, but he was getting close. Besides, it might not even be real. Now that he was out in the fresh air, he was starting to think that his panic had been a little silly. No, it is. What makes you say that? You were so confident about it earlier. It seems out of character for you to be so certain. Well, gee, thanks. They continued in silence for another minute, before Katya turned back for just a second. But I'm glad you came with me. So, what exactly is the plan here? Simon asked. We're unarmed and up against a full crowd, and no offense, but I don't think either of us stand much of a chance. The only thing we need to do is stall them until the police get there. They shouldn't be that far behind us. If the sacrifice doesn't happen, then no one will do anything they'll regret. Regret? Aren't your priorities a little backwards? Explain. I thought we came here to prevent anyone from being killed. We are. But you sound like you care more about the cultists. She paused mid-stride and didn't say anything for a moment. Simon waited. It's not that I don't care about the sacrifice. I do. But no one ever thinks about the cultists. What do you mean? Well, usually in situations like this, there's one or two people that are actually the lunatics and everyone else somehow becomes involved. Maybe they're vulnerable and looking for somewhere to belong, or they don't take it seriously enough until it's too late. Maybe they've been coerced into it. It's not their fault they're here. Especially if our hunch is correct and these people are your fellow dreamers, I doubt they're quite in their right minds. I doubt they'd want to do what they're doing. I just don't want anyone else to have to feel that guilt. There was something strange about the wording of that sentence. Simon opened his mouth to ask when, off in the distance, they heard something. It sounded almost like chanting. Katya put a finger to her mouth and pointed ahead of them, to where light was visible through the trees, rendered more prominent against the growing gloom. They crept forward as quietly as they could, and the chanting grew louder. It was still gibberish, but oddly familiar gibberish. Through the last layer of trees, they spied a large crowd gathering in the clearing. It was just as Simon had described in his dream. None of them were wearing robes or anything of the sort, just large hats or other headwear that kept their identities vague. The whole thing almost seemed a bit impromptu. Even the lights were just a few electric lanterns. On the far side, on a little hill, the only robed person was leading the chanting. It was nearly a drone, the same thing repeated over and over again. That same phrase that Simon had muttered in his delirium. Hes osmek, hes hosmek, hes sit het isfrt. Katya glanced over, half expecting Simon to start repeating it right along with them, but he mostly looked horrified, staring at the scene like he'd already seen it before, and knew exactly how it was going to end. He probably did. She felt him tense suddenly, and as she turned back to the scene, she noticed the crowd parting as a young woman was dragged through. "Please, somebody find my father!" she was begging, but no one was listening to her. Just like in his dream, she was dragged up to the hill where the robed man was holding the knife. When she was brought close enough, she caught a glimpse of the man's face and stopped screaming for her father. Instead, she now just wailed in despair. The chanting rose to a frenzied fever pitch. The man raised his knife, and Katya was no longer next to Simon. Quick as a flash, she had scrambled into the clearing and up the hill, and had grabbed the man's arm. He fought against her, attempting to force the knife downwards. "Don't," she muttered. "Don't do this. You are making a grave mistake." The man didn't seem to hear her at all, and he was much stronger than she was. Simon started forward, though he had no idea what he was actually going to do. But before he could take a step, a firm hand gripped his shoulder. Just as he turned to see a pair of kindly blue eyes meet his, a whole coterie of men in blue burst into the clearing. The police had arrived just in time. One officer quickly disarmed the man with the knife, and Katya fell to her knees. Simon ran to her and mostly managed to catch her. He didn't get much out in the way of words, however, as just then the officer with the kind eyes approached them. "Are you Katya Borozova?" he asked her, and she nodded weakly. "Good." He nodded. "We've got a lot to discuss." The police cleared up the scene fairly quickly. It was a bit of a long march to the paddy wagons parked on the edge of the forest, but before long all of the would-be cultists were carted away for questioning. Later, it would be discovered that most of them were incredibly confused about what they were even doing out there, and all commented that they'd almost felt as if the whole thing was some sort of terrible dream. Since most of them proved to be useless, it was Simon and Katya that spent several hours being questioned about their involvement in the affair. It turned out, of course, that the officer was Detective Lagras, and he listened quietly as the two explained everything that they knew. Though for some reason Katya insisted that she had dragged Simon home and called the doctor by herself. When they were done, Lagras simply sighed. "Then the doc was right. It's just going to get worse." "What do you mean by that?" Katya frowned. Lagras stared her down appraisingly. "Look," he said, "it would be best if the two of you just returned to your studies and forgot any of this ever happened." "I would like very much to do just that." Katya's frown intensified, "but I still have some questions. Why, among all these dreamers, was Simon the only one to become ill? And why does it seem only he got the full picture of these dreams? Also, why did this happen in the first place? Is something bigger behind it?" Lagras seemed a little overwhelmed by her interrogation. "I can't answer any of your questions because I'm just as stumped as you are, but I'll inform the doc of your concerns. For now, why don't you two get some rest?" He gestured over to Simon, who, now that the adrenaline had worn off, was nearly falling asleep in his chair. Katya was disappointed and was grumbling something about telegraphing Angle herself as they headed out into the evening streets. By now it was dark, and their breath froze in the chilled air. Though they made to start walking, Simon paused. "Katya," he said, and she turned back. I just wanted to say, I think I may be the most clueless one here, and, well, if you hadn't shown up when you did, I don't know what I would have done." "Oh, don't be silly," she smiled. "You're the one who found me, remember?" "Right. Still, thank you." She stared back at him for a moment, and for once, it seemed like she was at a loss for words. "You're welcome," she said finally. "But if you want to pay me back, we never did finish that drink." He had to laugh at that. "You're right. We never did. My treat? As long as you do not collapse on me this time." They both laughed at that, and Simon realized he was smiling. He felt like he hadn't in a very long time. "It's a deal."